years. You must have started doing your stuff down there in Miami. You're about 10 years old, right?
Yeah, I had the maturity of a 10-year-old, and the experience of an 8-year-old. But no, it was literally, I think I was 22, because my wife and I were married a year later, which was 23, and we've been married 28 years. So yeah, it was a long time ago.
Well, we're going to jump in a minute into some of the more visible pieces of Pagula Sports and Entertainment and the Bills and Sabres and all those other kinds of things. But for those that might be listening that are maybe wanting to hear a little bit more about that startup piece and the entrepreneurial piece of things, what was it like to start your own business way back in the beginning, that very first business, even before AdPro? Start your own. What were the biggest obstacles and challenges? What were the biggest rewards?
Well, the biggest obstacle and challenge was not knowing what I was doing. My partner and I, if you engage me with a little story, the reason I opened up an office supply company was I represented a player in the NBA, Ronnie Cycli, who played at Syracuse, and he was playing for the Miami Heat at the time. Well, I was his agent, and I signed him to a marketing deal with a large office supply company throughout the state of Florida. And when I moved back to Buffalo, and the firm I was with kind of dissipated, the owners of that office supply company became mentors of mine, and friends. And ironically enough, they wanted to open up an office supply company. They wanted to take their company national. And one of the cities that they were looking at growing in was Buffalo. So they asked me if I would be interested in doing that. And I kind of lied to them and said yes, knowing that I still wanted to be in sports. But, the Lord shined on me. And we started an office supply company, and it turned into, one of the greatest experiences of my life. But I knew nothing about running a company or being a business person or an entrepreneur. It kind of just happened. And, I always like to say, when you get thrown in the water, you really only have two choices. One of them isn't very good. And so I just started swimming and surrounded myself with some really great people. And that's how it started, Skip. Never took a business class. I graduated with a degree in communications and political science. Didn't take any accounting, didn't do any of that. As a matter of fact, the only business class I ever took was it wasn't even online back then. It was a cassette course, I'm afraid to say. And I think I got like a C- on it. And I had to write a business plan as part of it, so I wasn't very good at it.
Okay. So if you jump from that first business, then you start focusing a bit more on AdPro Sports and so forth. Now AdPro Sports is this huge, one of, if not the biggest Nike dealership in the country. What's that feel like? Even though they've been bought by the Pagulas, you still serve as the president, to see something that you started being, one of the biggest in the country. And you got to have some pride about that.
I do. Again, it exceeds all dreams that I had as a kid. But what I'm most proud about is the work that we do. We did a ton of work for the NBA during the bubble, which is currently going on right now. And so when I see that on television, and I know we produced all that merchandise, and I see the commissioner of the NBA come out wearing a shirt that we did for him 2 weeks ago, I look at that really as prideful. And I also think about all the people that contributed to it. We're not just a group that does marketing and sales. We have 90 some odd employees, and we have production workers, who do the work in the print shops. We have, packaging fulfillment team. We have graphic designers. We have, web designers. It as they say, it takes a village. And I could probably, that one polo shirt that the commissioner was wearing, I could probably name 10 or 12 people that went into literally making that happen. And so for an organization, it is very prideful for us to see what we've accomplished and to grow. I'll share with you one thing that, Terry said to me when he bought the AdPro was, he said, how many employees can you grow this to? And at the time we were probably in the mid 50s. And, I kind of said to him pre-COVID, I said, if you give me 5 years, we can get up to 125 or 150 employees. And we were well on our way, before the pandemic, to getting there. And that's really what's prideful, because that's our community. And as you know, and hopefully everyone on this call knows, there's some Houghton alumni, who are part of that. And, there's Medaille alums and, some Canisius guys and some UB people and all of that. I mean, that's what we're really most proud about.
I love that vision that Terry expressed in that comment to you, because it speaks to Terry and Kim's passion to give back to the community, create jobs, and be an economic engine in the Western New York area. So that's a pretty positive thing. You jumped from that to now being the executive VP for Pagula Sports and Entertainment, still serving as president of AdPro, and I know you've got some great folks that help with a lot of the day-to-day stuff. But what does a lot of people probably don't realize that PSE is the umbrella company for 23. I think if I counted correctly, if all their logos are up there, at least 23 different businesses make up Pagula Sports and Entertainment. That sounds like a huge job. What does your typical day look like, and maybe help people understand a little bit about what's under that umbrella in PSE?
Sure. So I'll start with the second part. So what makes up the PSE umbrella? It's the Bills and the Sabres first and foremost. But then it's also the Amerks and the Nighthawks and the Bandits. It's Harbor Center. It's all of our restaurants. It's AdPro. It's Black River Entertainment. It's Pick Six Creative. I'm sure I feel like I'm one of those people who are forgetting their kids' names. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into that. Pagula Sports and Entertainment is really the servicing group for all the teams. Like we always say, we're here to service the needs of the teams, to allow them to achieve their goals. And, first and foremost with our teams, their goals are to win championships. Our second goal is to be a sustainable, efficient business in Western New York. And our third goal is to be great, family partners with our associates and everybody else that we do. So that's our role, and we try to take the enormity of the job and break it down to that. We're fortunate, especially on the Bills side, to have outstanding leadership on the football side of things. So, when Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane talk to you about how they want to build a team and the culture and what that means, really, we follow their lead. And we want the business arm to think just like the team does. We want to be resilient. We want to be team focused. We want to be humble. We want to represent our community the right way. And my job is to steer that, in a lot of different ways, and make sure that as part of the executive team, all of us are leading by example in how we do those things.
Yeah. It was today on the news, I think, but they were interviewing Sean McDermott, and one of the reporters sort of threw him one of those sometimes tough questions about some of the things going on with the Raiders. And I just appreciated the classy way that he answered that question, and it just showed a lot about his character. And that says a lot about what the kind of team that you folks are putting together, with the kind of character people that you're using. Obviously, the most visible part of PSE are the Bills and the Sabres. You mentioned that. Can you give us a brief, I'm sure people, people are interested, but just sort of a state of the team overview on those two programs?
Yeah, the one's real easy to talk about. We're 3-0. Looking forward to a really, really important game this week with Vegas for a lot of reasons. But in all seriousness, I mean, the Bills are very much on the right track. Brandon and Sean came in. They corrected a lot of errors that had been, made previously. They have a plan in place. It's sustainable. You heard Sean talk all the time about sustainable success, not winning one year and falling back. So the Buffalo Bills are in very good shape. We have some great young talent. More importantly, we have some great young leaders in the organization, on the field, off the field. They're really good people. The Sabres side, we've struggled. Make no mistake, we don't hide from it. Those 3 goals I mentioned, we're far away from a couple of them. We have to be better. Kevin Adams is a longtime friend of mine. He's going to do an excellent job as the general manager. We feel like the coach, Ralph Kruger, was a great hire last year. He has a lot of the same attributes as Sean. Kim actually said in one of her interviews that when they interviewed Coach Kruger, it felt like when they interviewed Sean McDermott. That gives us a lot of confidence in where we can go as an organization. But we have to prove it. We have to prove it back to our fans. We have to be the organization that they need us to be. So we've got our work cut out for us there, but we have full commitment on how we do it. The issue on the hockey side, very frankly, is we just don't have any clarity yet around when a season is going to start and what that season is going to look like. So there's some unknowns there. And on the NFL side, is those that follow the sport had the first real serious outbreak of COVID this past week with Tennessee. I don't think the Minnesota one was actually anything. It might still become that, but that affected 4 teams. A little bit affects us. We play Tennessee the week after this week, so that's kind of the state of the 2 teams. But I can tell you that the future is really bright, and we're really excited with where we're at.
Great. Do you find in your role as the executive vice president, does your work focus mostly on those 2 teams, or do you find your finger in the other businesses as well?
Yeah, I wouldn't even say primary. I mean, it tends to lean to the 2 teams because the size of those businesses are so much bigger than some of the other businesses. But it is everywhere. We run 4 different hospitality restaurants, and trying to manage that through COVID, is very difficult. So there's a lot of time being spent about when to reopen our restaurants. There's a hotel involved, and anybody in the hospitality and travel business right now knows that, that's a difficult road. We have 3 main facilities, not even including the AdPro facility. Harbor Center is a $220 million investment by the Pagulas in downtown Buffalo. That's a multi-tenant facility that, requires some work. So, I always like to say, you let the work take you where you're supposed to go. And as I mentioned earlier, we're really fortunate because there's some excellent leadership at the Buffalo Bills, especially with our new senior vice president that we hired in July, Jason Sinaraja. They're doing a great job. So they've taken care of things really well.
Great. Where would you say the biggest impact on Pagula Sports and Entertainment has been from the COVID pandemic situation? I mean, you talked about all those different businesses. Obviously, hotels have been closed down for a long time. They opened back up to a little bit of a degree. The restaurants, some of those similar kind of things, fans in the stands kind of issues. Obviously having a season this year and being able to tie into some of the revenues from the TV contracts and stuff is huge. But, how are you folks dealing with those kind of issues?
Yeah, I would say that, the 2 main issues are the people. We've had to furlough some people. We've had to make some really hard decisions because of COVID, trying to be sustainable. Not every business is going to survive COVID, so we're trying to make sure that ours do. That's been a concern. And then certainly just the economic uncertainty of what's going on. I spoke to our staff sometime last week, I forgot which day it was, but for those of us in Western New York here, Delaware North is a multi-billion-dollar company, and to see their business come to a screeching halt, and them to have to make some very serious changes into their operation in order to survive, is a sobering concept for anybody who's running a business nowadays. We don't know yet how this is all going to affect us. So, we felt with Kim specifically, is we had to do everything we possibly can to survive in advance. For any of the NCAA basketball fans in here, is it's like the NCAA tournament. You just have to keep winning. You just have to win the day, as they say, and plan for when we all come out of this. And that's been our sole focus since the second week of March.
Great. Well, I'm going to remind our listeners that I've got about 2 more questions I'm going to run by Ron, but if you have questions that you want to ask yourself, feel free to enter those in the chat. Just address those to me and we'll do that. But one of the things that in my mind, Ron, is it would be interesting. You've got a wife and 2 grown kids, obviously different stage of life than maybe somebody starting out with small children, but how did you when you were younger, and how do you now prioritize, maintain family? I know you're a family guy. How do you make that work in a job that's as busy as yours?
Well, you better have an amazing partner. So all credit there goes to my wife. You know, I missed way more than I should have missed as a dad, but you know, I tried to do all the other things with them that, you know, that matter. But it's hard. You know, we always say, you know, there's a sacrifice to some of the things that we do, and you try to balance that. But you know, every day it's hard. You know, looking back, I'm 52 years old now. If you said, you know, how would you do things differently? Yeah, I wouldn't miss some of the things that I missed. But that's part of growth, right? And that's part of how we look at that. But it takes everybody, including my kids. I mean, I don't know that personally I would have achieved some of the things that I have achieved without my kids' support, you know, and understanding and taking care of their business and taking care of their lives in the way that they have thus far. So really, it's a credit to them, you know, and I owe it all to my wife, and you know, she's the real CEO of our household.
I hear you. I hear you. Ron, I know you have several Houghton alumni who work for you at Ad Pro Sports. I give a big shout out to Abby Camacho and Jordan Mullen in particular. You work for a Houghton alum, obviously, in Kim Pagula. If you were going to give one word of advice, and you mentioned several other colleges that you have folks working for you, getting started in their careers. If you were going to give one word of advice to our students or our alumni that might like to move into the sports business world or who have an entrepreneurial bend, what would that be? You know, what advice would you give to those folks?
This is going to sound really cliche, but just be a good person. Start there. You know, I was just having this conversation with somebody this morning. Okay, so you have a resume. You've gone to an outstanding college at Houghton College. Your extracurriculars are, you know, 3 pages long. You've done all of the things right. Okay, that gets you in the door. But when you sit down for the very first time with somebody, all we're thinking about is what do I want to spend 40 to 50 hours a week with this person? Can I rely on this person? Are they good people? You know what I mean? That's what I would tell everybody, and that's the part that I think people tend to forget. Do you shake someone's hand? Do you look them in the eye? Do you return calls promptly? Are you nice? Do you smile? Do you say hello to everybody? A lot of times when we bring people in and we put them in, you know, quote, internships, which really means they do everything and everything, as everyone on this call probably knows, we're not judging their work product as much as we're judging their character. You know, and to me, that's the best thing I could say to everybody is just take the opportunities that come your way, get them, whatever they may be, and then let you as the person show that you belong, and you'll grow in the organization. There's no substitute for good people. And that's really the best advice I can give, because, you know, it's funny. I speak to a lot of sports marketing and management classes at various colleges, and they all want to know, how do they get into sports? Well, don't look at it as sports, first of all. Just look at it as, how do you get into the business? And it just so happens that they're in the business of sports. But really, at the end of the day, it's not really about the sport, unless you're, you know, on the football side or on the hockey side or something like that. You're really part of an organization. And think of it as any other type of industry, and don't treat it any differently. Just be the person that you are, and you'll find your way quite easily, because people get very impatient. And that's the other part I would say is, in the sports world, there needs to be some patience, because it takes a little while for you to be ready to advance. And those that are patient and put in the time tend to advance faster than I think a lot of other places do. So those would be the advice that I would give it, especially on the beginning side.
That's a great answer. And you started to answer this. You talked about patience. I wonder, one of our listeners, Becca Apgar, asked the question, what's the most important character trait for an entrepreneur? Would you add anything to that? You said a couple things there that got close to that. But
Well, so I don't like the word entrepreneur. And it's it's a funny story. So what I'll just say is, okay, so for anyone in business, you don't have to be an entrepreneur. I always tell our employees, you should think like you own this business. What would you do if you were in a position? So don't think of it as much as entrepreneurship. Just think of it as if you were fully responsible. Um, so from that perspective, what I would say is think outside the box. You know, I always, maybe this is a little bit of my agent background, but before I think about what we want, I always try to think about what the person I'm dealing with needs. Because if I can find a way to satisfy their needs, then my wants will become very easy to establish. But if I'm only concerned about my wants, then I'm not really developing a relationship. So, you know, I guess that's maybe the way I would answer that question is it's usually about the other person, not about you. And if you focus in on that, I've found that you'll be way more successful.
Maybe going along, sticking on that front end of the career piece, we have another listener, Izzy Ramos, who asked whether there were any internship opportunities at PSC or with AdPro Sports. If somebody, number one, are there those kind of opportunities? And number two, how would somebody go about, you know, throwing their name in the hat?
Yeah, there are, and there are quite a few at both. And, you know, does Izzy go to Houghton?
Yes.
Well, you have a leg up already. It's always nice to have the owner of your company be an alum, so that works. Yeah, we do. Online, we'll have those both at AdPro and throughout the PSC enterprises. You will not find them right now because with COVID, there are a lot of restrictions on, as everyone on this call may know, there's already restrictions on internships. So ours are going to, God willing, start back up again second semester for you guys. So after the first of the year for us, I would check back probably towards the end of October. And if you want, you can always send me an email and I'll direct you to the right place. And Skip, I'd be happy if you guys shared my contact information with the group after this.
Well, thank you. That's pretty generous considering what your schedule looks like. There's another question from a listener, Ben DeCastro. What was your experience like as an agent? What would you recommend it as a career? And what was the time commitment like? Was it as crazy as it seems?
Yeah, it's 24/7. You're responsible. I don't want this to sound overly dramatic, but you're pretty much responsible for somebody's life. Not physically, but their economic and their guidance and their careers. So it is a 24/7 job. If you develop the relationships with your clients the way I did, where they really were part of my family, I'm godfather to two of my players' kids. I've stood up in two of their weddings. Like I said, they're part of the family. Then I would tell you it's super rewarding. If you're just doing it transactionally, it's financially rewarding, but you'll grow pretty stale with it because it's a difficult job.
Great. Another listener raised the question whether PSC and AdPro have ever considered a formal partnership with New Era, also headquartered in Buffalo, obviously a sponsor for your field house, right?
Yeah, former sponsor of the stadium naming rights.
Yeah.
AdPro is a large distributor of New Era's product and has been for years. And New Era, being a community, West New York community-based company, and us, we want to help them and work with them as best we can during these difficult times. And they're an NFL licensee and an NHL licensee, so they are part of our extended family.
Okay. Maybe just one or two quick ones. One of our listeners asked the question whether you're optimistic about the city of Buffalo's future overall. Obviously, that's been a high priority for Tim and Terry, I'll spit it out, and in terms of investing back into the community, Western New York, and so forth. Are you optimistic about the city as a whole and where it's going?
Pre-COVID, I would say that I am extremely optimistic. Post-COVID, I will tell you, I think we're cautiously optimistic. The COVID impact for cities like Buffalo, states like New York are significant. As long as our elected leaders kind of help through this whole stage with all the craziness that we have going on now in that world, I believe we'll be back on a very prosperous path for Western New York. And Kim and Terry are certainly taking a lead in that, but others have as well. M&T Bank, has made tremendous investments in Western New York. The Blue Cross Blue Shields of the world continue to add jobs. Obviously, the University of Buffalo is a driver of many things in our community. So there's a lot of great partners, not to leave anybody out, but just those in particular have shown great leadership throughout Western New York as well.
Great. Maybe one last, let me just scroll down here. I had one question I was going to ask, but somebody just put a new one in there, and I don't want to leave anybody out if I don't need to. Was Becca telling me my camera had shut off, so I had to resurrect it. One of the last question, one of our listeners was curious as to the correlation between AdPro success and the Bills and Sabres success. AdPro, one of the biggest Nike dealers in the country. To what degree is that impacted by how well the Bills and Sabres do? And then part two of that question, do you envision as you grow AdPro that you could have a presence in other major sports cities across the country, or are you pretty content with working long distance from Buffalo?
So the Bills and the Sabres success, primarily the Bills success, does have a positive impact on AdPro. The more exposure the Bills have, the more what we do for the Bills comes to light, and teams, are great copycats in our world, and so they see what we do, and they have reached out about emulating that. So yeah, that has been a direct correlation to AdPro's growth. As far as AdPro's growth, right now, we do business, throughout the country, certainly, but I don't believe our business model works with multiple locations. We could have sales reps who are based in other parts of the country, but our headquarters and our production facility and our fulfillment and the heart of our organization has to be one centrally located place, because there's so much synergy that goes into getting orders done, especially a company like us that actually does all the printing and the manufacturing and, the fulfillment. So I don't see a way that we would have multiple distribution centers. And the other thing, I'll say is, bigger isn't really our goal, better is. So, AdPro is a fairly large company right now. We could be much bigger, but I don't know that that would make us better. And I also don't know that our customers would benefit from that. So what we try to do is just be the best version of ourselves. And, that doesn't mean, dollar signs. It really means what we term, effectiveness. And right now that comes from having, the heart of our organization in Buffalo.
Absolutely. Well, we certainly have appreciated our partnership with you and with AdPro Sports, with Paul. I talked to Matt Webb, our athletic director, just the other day, and asked him how things were going in that relationship, and he couldn't say enough good things about Jordan and the job he's doing, but you and Paul and the support that you provide. So we appreciate that. We appreciate your partnership. We appreciate what Kim and Terry have done in terms of supporting us and enabling us to make that jump to Division III and to have the kind of programs we have here. So thank you for those things, but thank you too for taking time to be with us tonight, and appreciate it. I know you've been busy, you've had a long day, so to hang around and do this for us tonight has been appreciated, been important. So thank you.
It's our pleasure, and I thank you guys for being great partners of all of us, and for all that you do for our Western New York community. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks to both you and thanks to both Ron and Skip for doing this evening. It sounds like you have your hands full and a lot of different things to think about, and it's encouraging to see you bringing your talent and leadership back to Western New York and contributing to the place where you went to college, and appreciate you also looking out for our students and other students like ours and giving them an opportunity to start their careers at a solid place where they can learn, they can be part of a solid culture. So thank you very much. Thanks to all of you for being here. Be sure to tune in for our next Best Talk, which will be on October 13th. Until then, and enjoy your homecoming weekend, and thanks to you all.
Thanks, everyone.